Hello.
Good afternoon, Tony.
Hello. I do apologize that I've joined a little late. For some reason, I seem to have lost the link, but it has been sent to me again, I guess, by Rachel. I do apologize.
Tony, we haven't started yet.
Just in the nick of time.
In the nick of time. At this stage, can I just check that the Chief Executive is with us?
Here, Chair, yes.
And can we have the items 1 and the notice and summons and attendance, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. To all members of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, you're hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee to be held today, Tuesday the 4th of May at 4 o'clock remotely. Working through the attendance list, Alderman Breslin.
Here, John.
Alderman Hussey.
Yes, John, here.
Alderman McClintock.
John.
Alderman McCready.
Yes, John.
Councillor John Boyle.
Here.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
And Shaw John here.
Councillor Gary Donnelly.
I'm Shaw.
Councillor Sandra Duffy.
Shaw.
Councillor Paul Fleming.
Shaw John.
Councillor Paul Gallagher.
And Shaw. Shaw.
Councillor Conor Heaney.
Shaw, John.
Councillor Jim McKeever.
John.
Councillor Sean Mooney.
Here, John.
And Councillor Martin Riley.
Here, John.
Thank you, members, and back to you, Chair.
Just to remind members of the normal reference attendance at meeting, I'd like to remind everyone who's in remote attendance, this meeting will be broadcast. Just checking that I'm not on mute there. This meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel, will be available for viewing by the public and media. Broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. Broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and to use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of the images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council's privacy notice may be found on the Council website, www.derrystrabane.com. All members are in attendance. Do we have any declarations of interest? Or I'll take those as we go through the meeting.
Chair,
Yes.
from an officer perspective, could I please declare an interest in part of one of the reports? That is report number 7, and specifically in relation to part of section 3.7 of that report. So I'll absent myself from any discussion at that point, and my colleague, Officer Richard Oosterhuis, will take the report, Chair.
That's grand. Thank you very much, Chief Executive. Any others I'll take as we go through the meeting, as and when they arise. Before I start the meeting, can I welcome Councillor Heaney to his first official meeting of this particular committee? And in doing so, I also give our thanks to former Councillor Mickey Cooper for the excellent work that he did whilst on the committee. You're very welcome, Conor, to this meeting. And I now move on to item 4, which is our presentation. And on that, I am welcoming Fiona and Tony from Noga, and they're giving a presentation regarding Leadership Development Programme for elected members. I'm not sure who's coming on first. Fiona, you're on screen. Tony, we've heard Tony, but it is not on screen yet. So can I presume, well, I'll leave it to you. Whoever's taking the lead, over to you, and we await your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. I will begin the presentation.
Thanks, Fiona.
So good afternoon and warm regards to members and officers of the Governance and Strategic Planning Committee. We thank you for this opportunity to present today on the Noga Leadership Development Programme for elected members, which after my initial introduction, I'll hand over to Tony, the programme facilitator, Tony Brevard from Governance International. So my name's Fiona Douglas and I lead on the coordination and delivery of Regional Councillor Learning Development at the Northern Ireland Local Government Association, Noga. Take next slide, please. So Noga is the council-led representative body for local authorities in Northern Ireland. Our role is to promote, develop and champion local government by developing regional and specific responses to key issues affecting the sector. We do this through effective regional representation, regional coordination, regional learning and development, and effective communication for every member of every council. In terms of regional learning and development, since 2016, I have led an all-councillor member development network to diligently and collaboratively work on the design and delivery of an annual regional programme of learning and development, the purpose of which is to equip councillors with the key competencies, skills and confidence building tools to deliver in an increasingly complex landscape. So a core element of this is the Noga Leadership Development Programme, which is a CPD accredited programme which provides a unique learning, modular training and development opportunity for councillors to help them respond to the challenges of the role. It gives them a great opportunity to develop and improve their strategic knowledge, leadership skills and decision-making capabilities, as well as enhancing the councillor's corporate role and personal brand. It also helps to equip councillors to act as effective community champions and change agents on behalf of their local areas. The programme itself is very much tailored to the unique role of the councillor in Northern Ireland, recognising the impact that effective councillors can have. Next slide, please. Programme content includes an introduction to the role and the demands of the role, as well as an overview of the accreditation aspects of the programme. Further modules include leadership of local people, leadership with partners, and leadership place, looking specifically at coordinating how places are governed and how they will be shaped, really about place shaping. Further modules include leading improvement of outcomes and efficiency, as well as developing your future leadership role. I'll now hand over to Tony, who will take you through the more substance of the programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiona. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Fiona. Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm delighted to have this opportunity. You can guess the reason we're here is we want to drum up your support for councillors to come on the next programme, but we're going to do that by talking partly about the previous programme. And we've got some support, we hope, from one of your number, Darren Guy. I hope Darren is still with us. He was one of the victims, one of the participants in the last programme, and we're hoping he'll say that it was valuable to him, and the other councillors will chip in and say it didn't do too much damage either to his personality or his effectiveness as a councillor. So let's just have a next slide, please. 21st century councillor, it's a difficult role. Perma austerity, dealing with officers like chief executives, dealing with citizens like me, shaping the place in ways which will be good for our posterity. It's tough. And you need skills like knowledge, you need personal skills, dealing with other people, practical skills, digital skills these days, as we're demonstrating in this presentation because you're watching it on screen, and the soft skills of getting things done by influence. And all of those skills combine to allow you to play different roles as councillors. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. And the 21st century councillor has, no, back again. I said next 2 times, didn't I? I shouldn't have done that. The 21st century councillor has to play a lot of roles, each of them quite difficult, orchestrating all of the resources and all of the players in the place, advocate for those who most need help, steward of the place as we hand it on to those who come after us, a sense maker to explain what's going on, often with wicked problems that are hard to explain, a buffer between contending views, contending interests, a catalyst of change, and an entrepreneur trying to bring positive change and positive developments to you. And you can't play all those roles at once, but on this program, we look at how each of those roles might be played by councillors at different times in different ways, or in which they might support each other, so that the team as a whole gets all those roles played, even if individuals concentrate on particular roles there. Next slide, please. And we look at a whole range of resources. There's a very useful booklet on political skills, a political skills framework from the Local Government Association in England, and we look at various aspects of that. This particular page, this particular slide from that booklet talks about the positive characteristics that are needed for good local leadership and the negative characteristics. You'll recognize that all of your colleagues engage with their community, canvass opinion, they keep up to date with local concerns, they encourage trust and respect. And I'm sure you won't be able to give me any examples of councillors who display the negative local leadership characteristics of not engaging with the community, maintaining a low public profile, treating groups of people unequally, having a poor understanding of it. But in the next slide, please, we then ask people to reflect on those positive characteristics and negative characteristics. We ask them, what do you think are your particular strengths in terms of that list? How is your role changing, and what is driving that change in terms of the criteria on that list of local leadership characteristics? And can you illustrate the things that you think are your strengths by writing down examples of things that you think you've done well over the past year? And then, of course, the key question: what aspects of your local leadership could be strengthened? And is there somebody you know who has these strengths really that you might learn from? So we have a whole set of such lists of characteristics and criteria which are interesting to reflect on, and these reflection charts which we ask you then to build up over the course of the program, so that you get a better and deeper picture of the things you want to improve in yourself and in your relationship with others and with the council. Next slide, please. What does it involve from elected members who come on the program? Well, your time. We have in mind that next year we'll probably have 8 3-hour modules over a period of about 8 months. Some reading each week, maybe an hour a week, but it'll be about local government, so it'll be fun. Effort from your side, 2 practical assignments, making a presentation at the end, and keeping a learning journal, which will feed into that presentation, what you've learned as you go along, as you've used the various tools and learning guides that we make use of in each module. And it also requires imagination. It requires councillors to reflect, to chat with their colleagues, to try out ideas in their daily work as a councillor, to experiment, in other words, to see which bits of the things you learn in the programme really can help you and which may be less important. And bringing your imagination in maybe involves another hour a week. Next slide, please. It's accredited, so you'll get a scroll at the end of it, something that you can hang on the wall or put in the dining room cabinet. This is of course optional, but we think councillors do like to have some kind of credit for the inputs they put in and for other parts of your work in your other roles that you might play. That kind of continuous professional development can be helpful. 24 hours if you simply attend all the modules, 36 hours if you put the time in to do the assignments, the presentation in the last few modules, and the completion of the learning journal. Next slide, please. Just to show you the kinds of things which have come up from presentations made by different members over the last few months. Next slide, please. Here's could you click? Yeah, that's good. And click again, please. And click again, please. You can see what's building up here. And click again, please. Here is somebody, thank you. Here's somebody reflecting on how their role as a 21st councillor has changed. In the committee side, sense maker, dealing with officers, doing practical things. But during the implementation of a major change process, which was outlined in this presentation, the elected member had to act as a buffer between different interests, an advocate of those people who really needed help, a catalyst for change, and an entrepreneur bringing some very positive commercial type interest to the fore, so that the income side of things made sense. Looking back, that member reflected that without realizing it, his role had been as an orchestrator. And it's not something he had realized before. He was actually bringing all the players to play together in a story that made sense. And in terms of the local leadership characteristics that we talked about earlier, this elected member rated himself as engaged, as mediating between other people, other interests, working well with others, but reflected that perhaps it might have been a little, he might have engaged a bit more with what the council needed strategically and not just what people were pushing for. So it was a chance to reflect. So that's one councillor's, that's one item that came up in a presentation made by one councillor toward the end of the programme. Next slide, please. Another slide shows an elected member thinking, yeah, I've demonstrated empathy, understanding the views and motivations of my constituents. I've demonstrated the ability to facilitate finding common ground. I've demonstrated some strategic thinking, and I've been able to find ways of keeping my motivation going, energy levels going. But hey, there were some skills that were lacking. I've got to keep, I need continuous development. I need to keep expanding my skills and my learning and identifying potential partners who can help me, sitting with Nelly, if you like, working with other people who do things better than I do so that I can pick up some of these skills and convince other people that they've got something to offer. Next slide, please. Well, here were people who passed the pilot program, and they're all holding their scrolls very, very proudly at the end of the pilot program. No, back again, please. Yeah, I just wanted to say that the program that we ran in the last 12 months, they have just received their certificates, but of course, being virtual, we can't do a photograph of the 2020 bunch, which would include Darren, of course. Next slide, please. The learning approach, we think this program has been effective. We hope so. Certainly the evaluations have been very positive. It's very interactive. It's councillor-led. We've kept feeding in participant suggestions. There's a co-design process at work here. It makes a lot of use of councillors' own experience, but it gives relatively new councillors support in developing their skills and knowledge as well. We keep in touch with everybody throughout, so if anybody misses a section, we run catch-up sessions so that they don't feel they've fallen behind. And the assignments I've talked about give councillors a chance to hone various skills, certainly their reflective skills, certainly their PowerPoint skills. A number of councillors have commented that making this kind of formal presentation involves a range of things that they don't always have the chance to do, and it's been really valuable for them. It allows people to bring in learning from throughout the programme in order to build up a picture of what they do well, what they need to do better. And we do try to make sure that the program is fun. And so far, I have to say, we've had fun delegates, which have made that possible. The program's therefore been designed to help councillors develop their confidence, using not just the modules and the learning materials, but personal reflection, discussions with colleagues, so that they can enhance their personal leadership, not just for the benefit of local people, but for local government more generally in Northern Ireland and wider. Next slide, please. I mentioned fun. We think this is pretty important. One of the delegates actually used this slide in one of their presentations. What we learn with pleasure, we never forget. And that's, we tried to make that a motif through the program. Next slide, please. For the future, we're now designing the next run, which we're hoping you will send, to which we hope you will send some delegates. We're expecting a blended learning approach. Certainly Zoom will play a part of that, or some other online learning platform. There could be some in-room sessions as well. We'll wait to see how things pan out. Mixed timings on Zoom, we expect the timings to be 2.5 to 3 hours. And if we have people in rooms, as they'll have to travel to a convenient place, maybe it'll be a bit longer. We'll perhaps extend the invitation to be a delegate not simply to councillors, but to some independent members of local partnership boards. We'd like your views on whether that makes sense. We thought a little bit more diverse membership might increase some of the learning. We do intend to bring in participants from the 2 previous programs to share the lessons learned and to talk from a councillor's perspective about some of these issues. And no doubt there will be other issues. We'll be doing this, the design of the next running, the final design of that over the next few months. And some of that can be done with the prospective delegates if they register sufficiently early, of course. Next slide, please. We've got knowledge resources for this program. Even if you can't come in the program, some of the things there might be interesting for you to read, because I know you're terrible difficulty finding things to fill your time, but there are 4 very interesting things you might read in the meantime. And if you come in the program, you'll find you'll be discussing them in some detail. Next slide, please. And on our Governance International website, we've got 80 case studies of how local governance can be made better, and many of those involve local councillors improving local governance, and we think you'd find them fascinating, and we very much hope that there'll be some case studies from Derry City and Strabane over the next year or 2. And the textbook that myself and Elke from Governance International run, which is now used throughout the world in many university courses and other courses on public management and public governance. Next slide, please. And there's a bit there about who we are, Governance International, a non-profit based in Birmingham, but employing people with Northern Ireland accents, amongst others, and working throughout Europe and indeed wider in the world. So that's it. Next slide, please. Those are our contact details. We hope you found this interesting. And if there is time, Chair, for any Q&A, we'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have.
Fiona and Tony, thank you for a very interesting presentation. As you probably know, we have quite an active member development group within Council, and Darren, of course, is part of that. And as you rightly say, he's been part of your previous course. And I do note in the chat box that Darren, although not a member of the committee, wishes to address you both. So I think we'll take the voice of experience, immediate experience from Darren on this. Over to you, Darren.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. And thank you, Fiona and Tony, for the presentation. I think I have to speak in this as I want to completed the course on behalf of the Member Development Group. First of all, thank you for furnishing me with the knowledge that I have gained from the course. So far, it's been very relevant. The course covers items of local leadership, the importance of collaborative and partnership working on a cross-party basis, place shaping, community planning, and how it all comes together under LDPs. It has encouraged me more to scrutinise and be more objective and explain such processes as co-production, asset mapping, and the importance of using data evidence, why we should map pathways using scale and scope, the understanding of complex systems and wicked problems. All very worthwhile information for new councillors, as well as a refresher for the more seasoned councillors, and anyone seeking in-depth learning that would have a positive effect on their role as a councillor would do well to sign up to this course. Now, I started, I was 9 months into my tenure, and probably could have been maybe better with 2 years behind me before I came on it, but it definitely gave me an explanation of a lot of the terms that I was working with and coming up against and so on as my role. And I felt that it was very worthwhile. And again, thank you both for taking me through the course. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks a lot, Darren.
Thank you, Darren. I didn't hear any questions there, and I think next time when you're making a presentation to some future council on the issue, bring Darren along with you there to assist with the selling. Thank you, Darren, for that input. Councillor Doyle, Emmett.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tony and Fiona, for the presentation. Sorry, did I call you Mayor there, Derek? Apologies. Appreciate you letting me on. Can I just clarify, maybe from Ellen or from Sharon if they're here, Is this the same program that it was discussed at member development, the ILM level 7? I'm trying to get my head around if they're the same program or not. But certainly it looks to me that, I would be very interested in it as a new councillor in terms of trying to learn new skills, because I think if becoming a member of this council has taught me anything, it's the amount of things that you don't know. So thanks very much for the presentation. And again, Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Emmett. Very interesting observation. There's what you don't know. I'm going to bring Michaela in first, and then I don't see anybody else in the chat box at the moment. Bring yourself, Fiona. And
Thank you, Chair. And I don't have any questions. It's more comments. It's just nice to hear. And thank you, Fiona and Tony, for the presentation. And it's nice to hear from Darren, who is someone who has been through the programme. It's nice to hear him speak of the programme and how it worked for him. And I suppose, just as I've done some member development programs, but this looks a really interesting one, and every day is a learning day, and every day we don't all have the answers, and we don't all have the power of knowledge that we would like to have at times, a mediator, or to have the digital knowledge even, or the peacemaker or the sense maker. So you're learning new skills every day, and I suppose this is one way to challenge what we do know and how we could better ourselves. I think as a counsellor, I always talk about language, and language is key to everything as well, and it's how we put ourselves out there. Mediator, I think sometimes we are always being asked to be a substitute as a legal advisor, so you don't always have the answers. We're not trained to be the legal expert. So, and I think as a counsellor, sometimes, we have to just say, no, I'm sorry, I can't. And I think that's important as well too. We all want to do the very best for our constituents, but sometimes we just have to, just say it as it is. And I find as well too, a good listening ear, because a lot of people, a lot of our constituents sometimes don't want, they want support in a different way, and sometimes it is just that listening ear. So good communication and listening skills, and I see it's in the programme. So I would be happy to be put, after hearing the presentation, I'll be happy to put my name forward for the next programme. Thank you, Fiona and Tony. Thank you, Chair.
Fiona, do you want to answer the question on the ILM?
Yes. Okay, thanks, Chair. So the original pilot that we coordinated of the leadership programme was through an ILM level 7 accreditation. However, when we scaled up the programme for 2019-2020, we accredited on the basis of CPD accreditation, as we felt it gave more scope to tailor the assessment side of it to the skill sets for counsellors.
And if I could just come in here, Chair, Michaela's point is very good. Every day is a learning day, and certainly we hope that on this program we help people to learn faster and get the most out of their daily experiences. But Michaela, every second day is a forgetting day. So part of this program is trying to make some of the knowledge a bit more memorable, and so that it sticks a bit longer as well. But you're absolutely right. We're all in this to learn and find ways of doing better, and the program is designed to try to help with that.
Very interesting, Tony, your last comment there. I suppose you're encouraging those of us longer in the tooth at this game. Don't forget about you can take the course. And with that particular comment, Councillor John Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. The longer in the tooth comment, is that what you're, and then of course then a beautiful segue over to me. Thanks, Fiona. My camera currently working, but as Fiona hopefully confirm, that's no bad thing for you, Tony. So you're stuck with my voice, but just to say a ringing endorsement from Alderman Darren Guy there. Clearly he has enjoyed the course, learned a lot from the course, and actually as the chairperson of our member learning development working group that we have here on council, and indeed as a member of the regional working group, and Fiona will know me through that as well. I don't think I need any declarations of interest as such, because my interest in it is to contribute to the learning development of all elected members, and so that's a continuing ambition. And obviously, you know, when we move forward now in our next working group discussion, then this may be something that we will, as members, want to expand upon, because clearly I'm very, I'm very conscious of the fact that Alderman Guy was our only person involved in it in the last year, and so it might be something that members may well wish to expand upon and provide opportunity for others as well. And if members want to do that, obviously that's something that we'll put through the working group and see. But you know, just reflecting on some of the comments as well, Tony, and I don't really have any questions because your slideshow was so self-explanatory, and it really outlined what it's all about. And then, as I said, with Darren coming in afterwards and commenting on how he felt it worked, it's certainly something that we all should reflect upon. In fact, there's a local broadcaster here who's wont to say, as many will know, that every day is a school day. And if you walk through life thinking that you know it all and there's nothing left to learn, and then clearly you're heading for a hefty fall, I would suggest. So I think it's something that we as a council certainly may well wish to continue with. I can't comment on that from a simple endorsement at this point, but if other members are inclined to go and expand upon the experience for our members, then I'd be very supportive of it. So many key elements of what you outlined there are what it is to be an elected representative at local government level in particular. So again, thank you to you, Tony, for the presentation, and again, Fiona, thanks for your presence here also and your contribution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Boyle.
Fiona, Tony, do you want to wind up with any comments yourselves before we move to our next item?
Perhaps just to say, Chair, that if people are interested personally, we'd very much welcome having informal discussions, chats, what it would entail, how it could meet specific needs that you might personally feel you have, and that the program could allow you to explore. So very happy at this stage to keep, you know, no commitment at this stage, but very interested to talk to people about whether this might be an interesting way for them to spend a bit of time in the next 12 months.
Fiona and Tony, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm minded to think of that saying, you know, the person who hasn't made a mistake hasn't learned anything. But I suppose if you can do it easier without making the mistakes, it's a better way to go, perhaps. And with that, I trust that well, you've had the chairman of our member development working group, and I trust that is your course will feature in the next meeting, and that members of council will have that information distributed to them, and hopefully you'll see some of our folk going forward. But one quick query for myself, I just forgot there. You mentioned going forward, coming out of pandemic, thankfully, you moved to Zoom and in-room meetings. Would there be a chance at some stage that you might have a mixture of both, whereby, you know, if there's a difficulty in somebody actually getting along to an in-room, that there would be the opportunity of online interaction with the in-room meeting? In-room, you see the whites of their eyes is the better way to go, but would that be a possibility?
Thank you, Chair. That's really interesting. And Fiona and I have discussed this, but it's still early days to make plans. we kind of assume that at least for the first half of the next running, we'll have to use Zoom. And at some stage, there may well be the possibility of some in-room presence. Whether that would be for everybody or just for some people, we don't know. We're pretty confident, Chair, that there'll be at least an interim period when there'll be both people on Zoom because they can't make the in-room meeting and some people in the room. And of course, there are certain issues about that because the second delay in Zoom is not ideal for conversation, but you can get around that. And we have been trialing a variety of ways of making sure that that blended approach works. I personally hope that blended approach will last for a very long time to come, because in most of our work, we like to think we will be meeting people again. There are certain advantages of being in the room with people. But by the same token, there are advantages in being able to call on people during a meeting who are not with you, and it can't be with you for very good reasons, but can dip in for at least a quarter of an hour or half an hour or 2 hours without having to travel a long way, So I'm assuming, I think Fiona will agree with this, that at least some of this program is going to be blended. Whether or not there's much in-room presence during the running of this program, only time will tell.
Thank you very much indeed, and innovation, I think, as we move forward. Thank you indeed. And
thank you all very much.
And I was going to say safe journey, but I don't have to say that nowadays.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Thank you. And members, if we can move, I think it's to item 6, which is the minutes of the open minutes of the last meeting on 30th March. Those minutes have been approved at Council for accuracy. Is there any member wishing to bring a matter arising? Who have we got? On accuracy?
Yes, Chair.
Reminding you, Alderman McCready, they've already been approved at full council for accuracy, but I'll take your point now. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I didn't see it before council. It's GSP 53/21 on page 40, paragraph 4. If we can delete Department for Communities and insert Department for Economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. Thanks, Ryan. Presume members are content with that. That's accuracy. Any matters arising, members? Any of the pages? Nothing in the chat box, members. So I'm moving on to item 7. And the Chief Executive has already declared an interest in this one. So I'm just checking if John is gone to the lobby. And who's taking this one forward? Richard, is it yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Me, Chair.
Members
Chair, just to note,
okay, John.
I don't think there's any need for me to go to the lobby. It's certainly just something I would prefer Richard would lead on.
Okay, that's my apologies, John. Agenda item 7. Richard, can you take us through this particular item? Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Members, the purpose of this report is to update members on the UK Government strategic funds, specifically the UK Community Renewal Fund, Levelling Up Fund and Community Ownership Fund, and to seek members' approval of potential projects for submission and to provide an update on the Peace Plus programme and how that's developing. In terms of background, in December 2020, members were presented with a report on EU successor funding and a verbal update following the autumn spending review announcements by the Chancellor. Following this, at the budget on the 3rd of March this year, the Community Renewal Fund, Levelling Up Fund and Community Ownership Funds were all launched by the Chancellor. Would like members to note, though, that despite the launch date on the 3rd of March, detailed information on the rollout approach in Northern Ireland was sort of delayed for a number of weeks, and the information came out in pieces rather than the release of a funding call with all submission criteria to hand. So we've been basically piecing this together over the last few weeks. In respect to the Community Renewal Fund and the Levelling Up Fund, there's a reference respect to capacity funding. We don't have confirmation on the Community Renewal Fund, but we've, as of Friday, it's been confirmed that in due course, all Northern Ireland councils will receive £125,000 of development capacity building funds for the following rounds of the Levelling Up Fund to help with development of potential projects and bids, which is good news in itself. Also, members will have Appendix 1, which is a slightly longer detailed summary of the three funds we're talking about today. The Community Renewal Fund, as I said, all three funds were launched on the 3rd of March. The Community Renewal Fund is actually a precursor to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. Now, it's been made clear that they won't necessarily follow on one from the other. Certainly, some of the priority areas will remain the same, but it's not the case that projects funded within this initial tranche will be seen as or be ahead of the game in any way in terms of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, on which we're basically expecting more details in the autumn at the spending review then. The total budget allocation so I'd like to point out that all three of these funds that we're talking about are being administered directly by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, which is a somewhat new approach to what we may be used to. The budget allocation is 11 million for Northern Ireland, and that is 90% revenue and 10% capital for the Community Renewal Fund. The deadline is the 18th of June, so a very tight deadline, with all expenditure required by the 31st of March. So that's the project delivered in full with full expenditure by the end of the current financial year. Bids can be up to any value up to the total of 11 million, but MHCLG are preferably looking for funds bids no less than 150,000. In respect to the Levelling Up Fund, again, the submission date for that is the 18th of June. The budget allocation is ring-fenced at least, and that's at least 20 million in this first round, and that's entirely dependent on the strength of bids coming from Northern Ireland. Over the entire programme period, it's anticipated that there's an allocation of 144 million for Northern Ireland up to the end of financial year in 24/25. In terms of project bid value, again, projects can be of any value up to 20 million. And the investment priorities for the Levelling Up Fund are smaller transport investments, regeneration and town centre investment, and cultural and heritage investment. Unusually for this, the executive are only eligible for the transport theme. They're not eligible for the regeneration and cultural and heritage investment theme. And again, the submission for that deadline is the 18th of June, with expenditure to be delivered by the 31st of March or exceptionally into 24/25. I won't dwell on the Community Ownership Fund, but that's there for members' reference, and on the basis there'll obviously be a lot of interest from community groups and organisations in that fund. Community Ownership Funds, local authorities aren't eligible for that at this stage, as far as we're aware, and it's the assumption is that that will stay that way, but we'll obviously potentially have to work with and have requests from local groups and projects to potentially maybe support and help them progress those. In respect to just a brief comment on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and the round 2 of Levelling Up, it's in terms of the round 2 of the Levelling Up Fund, That is likely to be expected in the autumn, or to proceed in the autumn, early autumn, sorry, with the submission before the end of the year, with then commencement of awards and things in the beginning of 22. However, the spend deadlines will remain the same, which is critical. So officers will be looking at what potential projects there will be for round 2 as well. In terms of the UK Share Prosperity Fund, again, just wanted to reiterate that we're expecting more information in autumn of this year. In respect to some of the key issues with these funds, officers have been working to identify potential viable and realistic deliverable projects that meet the parameters that the funders have set out, which are quite challenging. One of the key issues is the very pressured timeline for submission and very challenging delivery timescales, which limits the opportunity available to council in respect to those parameters. The UK Renewal Fund, as I've already pointed out, the expenditure must be completed by the 31st of March next year. At the very earliest, project promoters will be informed by the end of July this year, whether they're successful or not. That will leave, only on that basis, that will leave an 8-month delivery window from August to March next year. So that's a very short delivery window. In respect to the Levelling Up Fund, again, the submission by the 18th of June, and is a fairly detailed amount of information required, because obviously the potential money involved is more substantial, and the application is equivalent to an outline business case at the minimum. Obviously, if you have a full business case, they're quite happy to receive that in lieu of an application, in addition to the application. There is also an additional pass-fail criteria which has been made clear as of last week, which is that projects have to demonstrate spend in this financial year in some shape or form, or at the very least the project will commence before the 31st of March next year. Again, it also makes that very challenging. So in looking at what potential projects we could suggest, and in terms of what we have in development, the key criteria in terms of trying to sift projects are really the project status and the deliverability. I won't go through the details, members have it there. So on the basis of the restrictions and the challenges set out, and this is obviously also subject to further development, deliverability and procurement considerations, the following projects are proposed. So under the Community Renewal Fund, officers are exploring the feasibility submission for 2 submissions under the investment in skills and supporting people into employment investment priorities and investment for local business priorities. And there'll be further updates to the respective committees, so business and culture, on those. In respect to the Levelling Up Fund, based on the criteria set out in terms of the selection criteria, the following are proposed. Officers are exploring the potential for a rural pitches project. Again, I won't run this through this line by line. The second project is in terms of one that's ready in terms of business case development, designs and planning, is the Brandywell Sports Centre and Daisyfield project. And the third project, with the level of work that's been carried out to date, and a number of elements already having been in receipt of planning and permissions, was the St Collins Park Infrastructure Master Plan. Either delivery of all of it or elements of it. And should members be content to progress these further details on the projects, we will put before the relevant service committees. That's currently it on that's kind of like to conclude there on those funds. In respect to the Peace Plus programs, members will be aware that the consultation for the new 1 billion Peace Plus program is currently open, and will be closing on the 12th of May. Between the consultation that we carried out last year, there's hasn't been a huge shift in the priorities, and a draft submission is currently being drafted based upon our previous submissions. And as I've set out here at 3.11, it's to highlight some of the opportunities for local authorities to engage in the programme. Theme 1 is what we would currently refer to as the Peace Action Plans. And again, that has a pretty defined process moving forward, where SUPP will be appointing consultants to work with each of the respective councils to develop these the Peace Action Plans. Also under Theme 1 is the investment area 1.4, which is re-imaging communities. And again, there's potential there for capital investment on the main, obviously with the usual peace programming activities that are required for such programs. Health in inclusive communities, I wanted to highlight this as there's a specific rural regeneration and social inclusion measure, which will be very much of interest to members. And also under the investment area in 6.1, strategic planning engagement, which will allow for significant cross-border and high-level strategic planning in areas such as economic planning, energy and tourism. Opportunities under other areas are more limited, specifically highlighting 5.6, enhanced sustainable travel connectivity, where the full budget has been allocated of 165 million. It's being ring-fenced for the improvements to the Belfast and Dublin railway route. And members will receive further updates, obviously, as the programme develops and calls start becoming more clear and available in terms of projects to be proposed. In respect to financial equality, legal and HR implications, members are asked to note that the funding rules of the funds stipulate that any remaining overspend required beyond the date set out by MHCLD will have to be funded by the project promoters, and therefore this represents a potential risk which may need to be considered in due course. The short timeframes present significant challenges, and in order to ensure bids are robust and submitted within the relevant timelines, additional technical support may be required, and members are asked to ring fence a sum of £50,000 from the 21-22 capital budget for officers to engage as required in this regard. Members are asked to note the position in relation to the UK Community Renewal Fund, levelling up and community ownership funds, and endorse progression of the project bids as highlighted, and approve allocation of £50,000 for the technical support required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Very extensive report, and I'm sure members have gone through it themselves with a fine-tooth comb, and thank you for expanding on that. First questions coming from Councillor Heaney. Conor.
Thanks, Chair. It's more a comment than a question, but I think I raised at the last governance meeting just around concerns that I certainly had, and I think others have, that the British government's prosperity fund will fall well short of the European funding that it's designed to replace. And there's those elements of this are starting to roll forward. There's still not clarity in terms of how the wider prosperity fund is going to work and what scale it's going to be, but the concern remains that it's going to be a very poor relation to what it's currently replacing. The Community Renewal Fund, like it was mentioned there by Richard, just how tight the time frame is around it. Like I'd be aware that the community sector who were looking at this when it became when it was announced are clear that sort of 8 month window that you not only have to have this application in on a very short time frame, but spent and vouched for and done and dusted by 31st of March next year is very difficult to deliver on, and even it would question its worth to, if you were looking at the employability area, you know, offering somebody something for 8 months. It's even worse than the old age schemes, which at least give you 12. So there's concerns, and I think there'll be a lack of application or lack of appetite in many in the community sector to access any of this fund, simply because of the constraints that are put around it. Just finally, Chair, just like I would like to acknowledge and just mark the fact that the Brandywell Centre is receiving money to the Level and Up Fund. I think the councillors in the Moor Ward have been working hard at that for a while, so very grateful to see that included on that list. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heaney. I'm going to take Michaela next. Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Richard, for the presentation. No, my question has been answered, and it was regards to the time frame for spend in terms of the budgets and that, and how we have to demonstrate spend in this financial year. But Richard has alluded to it, so I'm happy with that. And again, just like Connor, I suppose it's good to see the rural pitches, the rural Strabane pitches there. Obviously, there's been a deficit of rural pitches and training facilities in the rural areas of Strabane for quite a long time. It's been a historical deficit going way back to the old council. So it's good to see that the multi-sports pitch development of an AstroTurf is being identified as one of the projects going forward. I would be reluctant to dance up and down and shout for joy at this stage, but hopefully, all things being equal, that and we are exploring the potential that these projects will come to fruition, and hopefully we can sing and dance about them at the end of it. So thanks very much, Richard, for the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Michaela. I don't have any others in the box. Richard, I have a couple of comments myself also on this, and I can empathise with a lot of the comments that have been made both by Councillor Heaney and Councillor Michaela Boyle. And I think you yourself referred to their timescales, and it emphasises to me the need for us as a council to have shovel-ready projects. And I mean, that's evidenced with, I suppose, the three major ones that are highlighted there. I would welcome the rural Strabane pitches one. I note in that it says the project would also address the deficit. I'm sorry, I'll disagree there. It will help to address the deficit. It will not totally deal with the deficit that has been identified by the playing pitch strategy that has been before council for some considerable time. I'm mindful also of the playboard report. Now, that was with us way before Christmas, and identified 27 play parks right across our council area that are in a very poor state. And I wonder, can those be brought together as a major project? I know you know as well, Richard, that I've been in touch with Colin Kennedy about that particular issue, and I would hope that is something that we will consider going forward, combining these into one big project, play park project that can address those 27 right across the council district that are in an extremely poor state. We've had motions in council, and I'll refer, for example, to two excellent motions from fellow Derry councillors. Councillor Maguire proposed and council endorsed his proposal for a regeneration of Newton Stewart. Councillor McHugh proposed and council endorsed the regeneration and looking at the potential that exists in Castlederg itself. We have the ongoing issue of the replacing the recycling centre in the Derry Valley. And I'm mindful when I look at the play park or the play board report, the one area of our council that has neither a district nor a neighbourhood park is the Derry area. And we have opportunities there, and it's been suggested in the report to a major upgrading of the Castle Park, for example, and I suppose very much adjacent to the Derry area would be Vaughan's Home, either to district or neighbourhood level. Councillor Edwards has constantly gone on, I was going to say gone on there, apologies Stephen, has constantly referred to the need for greenways, etc. in our council area. And, you know, I look at piece 4 or piece plus and think in terms of rural regeneration. And I certainly hope that officers, like the 3 major projects that we have mentioned there, that officers are also getting shovel ready proposals that have arisen through council meetings and proposals coming from our members. Richard, thanks for your report. Do you want to come back on any of the points that have been raised by Conor, Michaela, or indeed myself? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. No, just to really to highlight that to just reiterate that obviously these projects, if successfully submitted, will obviously be subject to the assessment by MHCLG. But obviously officers are working to submit stronger applications as possible for all of these projects. Obviously, we as I mentioned, there's the information around these funds and the rollout within the region here has been not ideal and not necessarily something we're used to. When we're used to receiving a call which points out all the yes and no's of that particular funding request. So we, as I said, we've been piecing this together. We're now at a point that we were able to highlight these projects to members. But obviously there's the opportunity with some of those things, if they're obviously eligible expenditure and projects that are viable for these funds, will be looked at for round 2, which will obviously where the development money or capacity building money will come in, that I mentioned at the outset of 125,000. So officers will be working with the capital members group to advance those proposals. That's all I have, Chair.
Chair, may I come in?
Chief Executive, yes.
Thank you, Chair, for bringing me in. And obviously I'm not speaking to the detail of the report, but just speaking to the generality of it. And thank you, members, for all of your comments in respect of this report. There has been, as you've reflected, Chair, an enormous amount of work done by led by Richard and his team to try to ascertain all of the parameters around these fairly complex funding opportunities. And I think members have reflected on the key challenge, which are those associated with timeframes. With regard to the broader comments, we do have, as members know, a hugely extensive capital programme with hundreds of millions of pounds of capital projects being progressed right across the council at present. Those that are currently progressing have been fully discussed by previous capital working groups and have been fully endorsed by council. Sitting within those lists, there are a significant amount of projects that we as officers are seeking opportunities to try to advance up the chain, if you like, to try to get them shovel ready, as you've said, Chair. And with regard to the various projects, the rural play projects that have been mentioned, the master planning of Newton Stewart and Castlederg, the considerable plethora of additional projects that have been brought to officers' attention through either notices of motion or reports or raised in committee over the last number of months. We as officers are having a number of meetings in the coming weeks to try to organise and discuss the resourcing implications of how we might take those forward. We will then call a meeting of the Capital Working Group to discuss with yourselves, members, and then obviously, depending on how we might prioritise some of these projects, subsequently bring them into this committee for endorsement to take forward. It is our objective always to try to advance as many projects as possible that members bring to our attention, or indeed we devise through other means through that process. But just to advise members, we do have an enormous resourcing issue in trying to take forward this scale of capital projects. So a challenging and difficult discussion ahead as to how we advance so many additional projects to those that have already been approved, but one that is exciting and is full of opportunity, but certainly a challenging conversation as to how we resource up to take those projects forward. But look forward to a future capital working group, and at this minute in time we would be trying to schedule that for as close to as possible post the AGM that we can, and in the meantime we'll do quite a bit of preparatory work around that. So thank you, members, and thanks on my behalf to Richard for working up such a detailed paper today as well.
Thank you, Chief Executive, and unreservedly on behalf of us all in committee, and I'm sure all council, we do thank you, Richard, for the work that is being done. But as the Chief Executive has referred to there, as members representing our various areas, we will continue to challenge. So you're assured of a job for a long time if you want to stay there, Richard. Thank you very much. Thank you. Moving to agenda item 8. Anna, I think you're bringing us this one.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this report in relation to the anti-poverty strategy, which all of you will be aware has been developed by the Department for Communities, and it's one of 4 strategies that has currently been taken forward under the suite of social inclusion strategies, and as many of you know, a very long-awaited new anti-poverty strategy under the New Decade New Approach. Members, again, you'll also be aware that the department has set out in their timetable the approach that they were taking forward in terms of the methodology for the development of each of these strategies, and in addition to that, they've also identified who the expert panel was and the co-design group that are now responsible for taking forward the recommendations. Members, this is a very welcome development in terms of now having the expert panel recommendations before us. And as an officer group, we had an opportunity to hear directly from the EFC on a briefing session in terms of the key components of the strategy. And you can see in terms of section 3 of the report that we have set out some of those key recommendations. And I suppose what's really important is the fact that there's a strategic approach to this, and it's a long-term intervention that has been recognised by the expert panel. They're saying that there's a need for a poverty commission and poverty truth process, and this is really to make sure that people with lived experience who actually know what it's like to face poverty and to make decisions in relation to their day-to-day life are actually part of the decision making and can actually influence the development of any poverty actions going forward. And that then takes into the development of an Anti-Poverty Act. And you can see that that Poverty Act sets out key components, which really is about addressing exclusion and making sure that there's full inclusion in terms of any poverty act going forward. Very interestingly, the expert panel, and I want to say at this stage that the expert panel were chosen on the basis of their expertise for having either been academics or practitioners in this field for a long number of years. And they've recommended that a life cycle approach should be used in terms of addressing poverty. And they start initially with child poverty, and they set out their recommendations in relation to that, and then move on to working age poverty, and then further along the line towards pensioner poverty. They say that one of the most successful ways in terms of addressing poverty is to increase household incomes. And as we all know, benefits have been identified for a long number of years as one mechanism in terms of addressing household income. So you'll find that within their recommendations, a quite considerable number that relate to benefits and looking to increase benefits. So at this stage, we would very much commend the work of the expert panel and the host of recommendations that they have made. We have given some very initial consideration in terms of these recommendations, particularly through the prism of Derry City and Strabane District Council. And in the report, it recognises that 27% of people who live in poverty in Northern Ireland are actually within the Derry City and Strabane District Council area. And again, whilst we very much welcome the definition of objective need and the fact that they do say around targeting of areas will be required, that we would want it to be more explicit in terms of our own council area, given the fact that we have such high levels of deprivation. And perhaps it's not so much about trying to convince the expert panel in terms of this, but it's actually the co-design group, because it will be the co-design group now that take forward these recommendations. So in the context of any of these comments that come forward, we're now trying to take these recommendations to the next stage and make them practical actions that will actually benefit local people within our council area. Which takes us to the next point. Whenever we ask the department, how will they determine which of these recommendations that they would take forward, particularly in the context of having a fixed sum of money, which ones would have the most benefit in terms of the residents within our council area. The department said that they do not intend to undertake an analysis in terms of any of the potential impact. Therefore, for ourselves, whenever we speak to the co-design group or whenever we make recommendations to the co-design group, we would be asking them to actually undertake analysis, because we would want to see those recommendations that would have the greatest impact within our council area and that would actually narrow the gap between the levels of poverty within our council area and the rest of Northern Ireland. We also welcome the fact that the rural connectivity, digital connectivity and access for people living in rural areas can be more significant than the urban context. So again, we may wish to make some recommendations in terms of the co-design group in terms of how they would actually quantify that and what the impact that might look like for rural dwellers. In terms of the report, it does recognise that there are cross-departmental interventions that are going to be required, particularly in relation to housing, employment, inclusion, and also in terms of access to services. We very much recognise locally the complex needs of people living in poverty and some of our very vulnerable communities, and the fact that we've got very significant health inequality. So the point here is that we may wish to draw that out in terms of any response that we put forward in terms of cross-cutting activities. Members, the next stage of the process is that the expert panel recommendations are being considered by the co-design group. We do have local representation on that co-design group, and it's our recommendation that we would put a written response, not just to the co-design group, but also in terms of the interdepartmental group that will be taken forward within the Northern Ireland Executive. Members, what we would wish you to consider is that every member would look at these recommendations and that we would take forward an opportunity to discuss further with the anti-poverty group that we have established internally, and that anti-poverty group would give further consideration to the detail of these recommendations and think of how they would apply in the context of our own council area, and that we would take back a further report to governance and strategic planning in terms of the recommendations we'd want to take forward to the anti-poverty group in terms of the co-design, but also the interdepartmental group under the Northern Ireland Executive. So very happy to take any questions or comments now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have three wishing to come in at the moment. I propose to take the three and then revert back to yourself if there are questions to be answered. Starting with Councillor Duffy. Sandra.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in, and thank you, Una. for that really comprehensive report and pulling out a lot of the details that were in the wider report. It is good to see this progressing, and it is something that we have been sort of waiting to see for quite some time. The co-design element involving the stakeholders, I think, is going to be key to this, and we do need to be taking a pretty proactive role in how we try and shape it ourselves, particularly as around the inequalities that we do face here locally as a council area. It's good to see it progressing, and I do welcome some of the key recommendations that have come out from the expert panel. And as you say, the people that were on that panel are well respected in terms of their expertise around it. There's particular things within the overall recommendations that I do welcome in terms of the community wealth building. I think that is something that as an area we should be looking at and doing probably more. And I know that I was at a meeting on Friday, and local communities themselves are looking at how they would take that forward. I think the Anti-Poverty Act, encompassing some of the issues that we have seen around the child benefit, the real living wage, the two-child policy, all those things need to be taken forward. I do, though, have concerns, as you have pointed out, around the lack of regional targets, I suppose. And I suppose in terms of welcoming, I do welcome the Minister's determination to get this on the table and to get it delivered. But we do need to make sure that we are addressing the regional inequalities that we have faced for far too long. And if that is in trying to influence and shape the co-design group through our own anti-poverty group, then that's what we need to be and should be doing. Surely, absolutely, you have my full support in doing this. Unfortunately, probably one of the restrictions that we face as a region is in terms of as an executive, we don't have fiscal powers to be raising the revenue to deliver everything that we want, which is always going to be a drawback for ourselves here. But in terms of being proactive and addressing the anti-poverty issues, from child poverty right up until to elderly poverty issues and everything in between, including period poverty, I think we're moving in the right direction. We have a way to go, but we are definitely moving in the right direction. So I would be happy to propose that we do take these recommendations to the anti-poverty group to allow that to start moving forward and trying to shape the co-design element of it. Thank you.
You're on mute.
Oh, was I on mute? My apologies. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher.
We're breaking up here. Councillor Gallagher seconded the proposal. Next I have is Alderman McCready. Ryan.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Una, for the report. I note the contents, and it's very welcome and timely. And specifically, just the good work which has been done so far by the relevant stakeholders to get to this point, and specifically the expert panelists. It's good to see an approach which encompasses, such expertise, ground up with the co-design group. I look forward to their outworkings of the recommendations and when it comes forward to the anti-poverty working group. Just two quick observations from our point of view is, first one is measure of impact, measure of effect. I didn't get the relevant detail on that based on this report. I understand that there's further reports to come, but if based on the outworkings and the recommendations, if we don't have a measure of whether it's KPIs or just basic information to validate this, I do have some concerns of effectiveness. And secondly, is funding. Clearly there's a departmental responsibility here, and Sandra alluded to a pertinent point of fiscal powers, etc. I just want to ensure that if we're driving this forward, the outworkings of the recommendations, which is grassroots and ground up, and it is to be commended, but I want to ensure that if we're going to do this and it's done properly, it must be financially resourced to deliver on all this. If that is not either ring-fenced or allocated to that level of degree, then are we really serious about tackling poverty, specifically within our council area, which it should be focused within the council area because they do deserve it. So principally, we support it. 2 observations in moving forward, and just keep up the good work to all those involved. Thanks, Una.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. Before I go to you, Rory, Councillor Gallagher has seconded that proposal. Do you want to speak to seconding that at the moment, Paul, or are you just content to second it?
Fine.
Pardon?
Fine.
Can't hear you, Paul.
Chair, I'm fine. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Councillor Farrell, Rory.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Una. I'm not a member of this committee, but I'm the SDLP representative on the Anti-Poverty Working Group. So we as a party welcome progress on this anti-poverty strategy. It's been a long time coming, 6 years in fact, since the High Court ruling that said that Stormont and the executive was basically breaking its own rules by not having an anti-poverty strategy. So there's a lot to welcome in here in terms of the recommendations. There's interesting proposals that'll tackle deprivation and destitution across the north. We've got the Anti-Poverty Act, you've got the introduction of a child payment, you've got a recommendation to stop the bedroom tax once and for all, and the same to the 2-child policy.
Not sure what's happened, Rory. You have frozen there. I'll come back to Councillor Farrell when he gets back online. Can I move to Councillor Harkin, Sean?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. And I'm not a member of this committee either, but I am on the Anti-Poverty Working Group, and I want to thank Una for the presentation today. And look, I also want to thank the expert panel that put together this study. I think it is a shocking documentation of the scale of deprivation across our district and right across the north. Almost 400,000 people living below the poverty line. I mean, these are just shocking statistics, and I think we should be ashamed of them. And 27%, as Una said, of the people who are living in poverty are in our district. So there's a tremendous amount of work to do, and there's great urgency to do it. And I think that everything is documented now. So this has to progress quickly to decision makers to begin to take action, because the delay is only allowing more poverty to actually develop. Because it's not just that the Stormont hasn't had an anti-poverty strategy. Stormont has actually had a poverty producing strategy. And there are question marks about whether this executive and the parties that make up it right now can actually seriously develop a strategy that will address the root cause of inequality and begin to turn around these shocking and shameful statistics. I don't believe that it will be enough for the political parties that are on here today welcoming progress and saying that they're going to support this. We look at the history here and we know it's going to take massive struggles outside of this council by ordinary people who actually are the ones who will benefit most from dealing with deprivation and seeing some of these proposals implemented. I think we as a council, in terms of our working group, will have a role to play, being the voice of our constituents and the voice of an area that is one of the most deprived across our society. So I think it's urgent that we begin to push for action in this, and welcoming this report isn't enough. The content of it is, as others have said, it tells us what's wrong, tells us what needs to be done, but now we need to begin to move towards action. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Rory, are you back with us? Councillor Farrell?
I am, Chair. Did you miss all of that?
Well, put it this way, whilst you were off, Councillor Harkin had time to give us his full contribution.
Right, okay.
Yeah, not at all. A fair bit over the last, what, minute and a half, 2 minutes?
Right, okay. I'm not sure where I lost connection, in fairness. I don't know, was anybody listening?
Una, do you want to?
Yeah, Councillor Farrell, you got to the point of where you were welcoming the different types of policy interventions in terms of benefits, and you were given some examples of those.
Right, okay. Well, here, I will continue. I'm going to just keep my video off. This is probably easier that way. So I had said that there were various aspects to the report that should be welcomed around the Anti-Poverty Act, about the introduction of the child payment, about the commitment to end the bedroom tax and the two-child policy, and the benefit cap, and obviously the living wage. So I note one particular recommendation, and the recommendation is that the Strategic Investment Board and InvestNI should have plans and targets in place to address geographical inequalities in employment and unemployment. We've been saying this for quite some time. You know, it is our council's corporate position, and I hope that the Economy Minister reads the recommendation and takes appropriate action. I would agree with Una in terms of there's a missed opportunity here around poverty in our council area. I agree that there is a reference to area-based deprivation, but 27% of people living in poverty in the north live in our council area, and there needs to be specific interventions in that regard. Just last week, we passed a motion relating to deprivation and poor health outcomes. And our approach is that there should be a specific strategy for this council area, and that approach should apply to the anti-poverty strategy as well. So I think the anti-poverty working group should develop key asks, and those should be brought to this committee next month or the month after. So thank you.
Thank you, Rory. Una, just before you come on, a couple of observations from myself. I particularly welcome that rural poverty is to be looked at as well, because one of the issues has been having workers in position in the rural area to be able to get assistance to those who are in rural poverty. And it's been rehearsed often enough, the differential between our rural areas where there is real rural poverty vis-a-vis neighbourhood renewal areas where there are people in there who can actually help. So I hope that is something that will be kept in mind. It's the ability to get assistance out to those who need it. And I suppose following up on Rory's point there with regard to deprivation, health, etc., it exemplifies the fact that what is truly needed is a multi-agency approach. We can't just throw this at one department. It's got to be a multi-agency approach to all of the issues that materialise going through. Thank you for your report. Do you wish to respond to any of the comments now that councillors have brought to you? Thank you.
Chair, thanks very much, and thanks to all the elected members. To take these back, and we will produce a paper that will go to the anti-poverty working group. We'll discuss it there and then take back a further report to governance and strategic planning in the next either June or July, but hopefully for June. Thank you.
Thank you, Una. It's been proposed by Councillor Duffy, seconded by Councillor Gallagher to accept the recommendation. I don't hear anybody speaking against it, so I'm taking that as agreed. Can I go back to agenda item 7 and just get a proposer and seconder for the recommendation on agenda item 7? If members want to check on agenda item 7, just going to the recommendation for clarity. Members are asked to note the current position in relation to UK Community Renewal, Levelling Up and UK Community Ownership Fund, endorse progression of project business highlighted, approve allocation of £50,000 budget for technical support as required and developing the bids. That was the recommendation proposed by Councillor Heaney, seconded by Alderman McCready, and I'm not detecting any aversion to that. So agreed that that recommendation is passed. And moving on to yourself again on agenda item 9, the hardship fund.
Thank you very much, Chair. To provide an update on the research that we're currently undertaking in relation to poverty locally. And you may recall that we had decided to undertake this research to help to inform the hardship fund in terms of the priorities that we would seek to go forward with. Members were also looking for approval for an additional £2,975 towards the cost of completing this research. Members, in the background section, you can see the detail in terms of the actual research itself and the context for it, and also the key components that we were looking to undertake in relation to this research. We had gone out to seek quotations for it on the basis of recommendations of organisations that could assist us to complete it. Unfortunately, we received no returns, and after some follow-up, we were advised that the timeline was too tight, both for the return of the quotation and also in terms of for completing the work. So we took advice in terms of the next process that we could undertake with respect to procurement, and we had two options to consider. One was to go through the Ulster University Economic Policy Research Centre or to go through SIB, and through discussions it was identified that the SIB route was the most feasible one for us in terms of time scales and also in terms of background information, in terms of available resources within the organisations. Delighted to tell you that whenever we approached SIB, that they have Stephanie Morrow currently working with them. Stephanie's got huge experience in terms of the work that she's doing with the Department for Communities on their Access to Food programme, and has also been working on pieces of policy research both within Northern Ireland and the UK. And because of Stephanie's background, she was able to look at our methodology and offer us some insight in terms of some additional components that we may wish to consider adding to that research. And one very, very valuable piece of work is called the Vulnerability Index, which we hadn't considered previously because we were looking at the 2017 NISRA deprivation analysis, and whilst that's very valuable in terms of being able to go down to the level of super output area, this piece of work is very much current because it looks at the current situation with respect to COVID, and also it allows us not only just to look at the DEA level and also ward level, but also can be analysed at super output area. So we find it as a very valuable additional resource to that in terms of the NISRA. And you can also see that there are some additional days that have been proposed, which would allow us to discuss with the providers who have been working in terms of poverty support over this last number of years, and looking to see how can we actually speak directly to people with lived experience, so that we have a very localised context in terms of what that need would be. In addition to that, it helps us to understand the level of unique beneficiaries, and that unique beneficiary will identify where there are gaps in provision or where potentially there might be over provision in certain areas. Members, on that basis, we are therefore looking for the additional £2,975, and I can advise you that the additional days actually are twice that amount of money, but SIB are very committed to working with us in relation to this project and have offered to pay 50% of the additional costs. The Head of Finance has confirmed that this additional budget of £2,975 can be found within the resources of the DFC COVID-19 budget, and therefore there's no additional financial impact to the Council. Therefore, members, we're asking you to approve the additional recommendation of £2,975, and also, members, that now that we have undertaken the detailed development of this piece of work, it becomes very obvious to us that this work fits so closely with the anti-poverty work, and therefore we're recommending that the hardship project falls now within the anti-poverty group and transfers from the welfare reform group. And it was absolutely fantastic initially to have the welfare reform group look at this piece of work, because at that stage we didn't have the anti-poverty motion, nor did we have the anti-poverty group. However, we now have this. We're moving towards making recommendations in terms of anti-poverty, in terms of the Northern Ireland strategy. We can start to see how this local research informs our thinking in relation to that, and therefore we find that it will be very valuable to have this piece of work now transferred to the anti-poverty group. So, Chair, very happy and to take any questions or to take any comments in relation to this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. It seems a very logical recommendation coming out of what we've just heard. Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, Chair, you just encapsulated it there. It follows on very neatly from the last item that we just discussed. So thank you, Una, for bringing it forward. And it does seem very logical that it would now sit within the anti-poverty working group. So I would be content enough at this stage to propose the recommendations as they do. They make sense at this stage. So happy to propose.
Thank you, Sandra. Councillor Duffy. That's been seconded by Councillor Mooney. Alderman McCready, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. Just thanks for the report. It links in with previous item, no issues. Happy to support.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. Councillor Mooney, Sean, do you want to speak or?
Yes, Chair, just to say thank you,
Okay,
Una, for
go
the
ahead.
report, and that it obviously ties in with the previous item, and that it complements the previous item, and happy to support. And it's obviously a very good idea to bring on the anti-poverty work group as well. It's but thank you, Una, for all the good work you're doing. Thank you, Una.
And no other speakers. Una, do you want to come back briefly?
Again, just to thank members, and we'll be very happy to take further updates to governance and strategic planning as we develop this research further. Thank you. Chair, just to let you know you're mute.
That's the saying of COVID, isn't it? You're on mute. It's been proposed and seconded, and I don't hear or see any to the contrary, so declaring that passed. The recommendation on agenda item 9. Thank you, Una. Moving on to agenda item 10, legal services. Philip, over to you.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So, members, this is a report in relation to the seeking of approval for amendments to the Council's standing orders. And as members are aware, this review of standing orders has been ongoing for some time, with a number of workshops having been held with the elected members to discuss potential changes, most recent of which was on the 22nd of last month. So, members, there's a draft amended set of standing orders together with some guidance, some notices of motion, and they appear at the appendices to this paper, and apologies that appendix numbers weren't inserted there. So the draft standing orders, members, reflect the changes which received unanimous support at the work group on the 22nd of April, and broadly I've listed there what those various changes relate to. Primarily removal of references to executive arrangements, some updates to definitions, change of standing order 2 to provide for the possibility for meetings to end at 10 p.m, amendments to standing order 10 to provide clarification as to the circumstances where matters may be conducted within confidential business, an amendment to standing order 11 to reference the Council's deputations policy, an amendment to standing order 16, including rewording of the definition of a notice of motion, a couple of other wee changes there, and agreed amendments to standing order 21 in relation to call-in arrangements, particularly where we're dealing with decisions of committees. There were some matters that members at the workshop had requested that they should be referred to this committee for a decision, and those are detailed within the report. Specifically, in Standing Order 4, options that were presented are discussed at the working group are presented to members as to the time limit for requesting permission to raise a matter under chairperson's business. The options being either 24 hours prior to the meeting, 48 hours prior to the meeting, or 2 working days prior to the meeting. In Standing Order 16.1, there's an option of inserting a provision that no member may submit more than 3 notices of motion in any 12-month period. Standing Order 1913, options that members at a physical meeting may speak for 5 minutes in introducing a motion and 3 minutes in replying, or 3 minutes in introducing a motion or 2 minutes in replying. No change suggested to virtual meetings. In Standing Order 24.2, there is an option that where a notice of motion or amendment has been disposed of, and may not be raised again, and the 2 options available are either for the remainder of the mandate of the council or for a period of 12 months. And those are matters which this committee will have to make a decision on today. So the following documents would then also be included, just for the sake of clarity for all concerned, as appendices to the standing orders, namely the protocol on remote meetings, the planning committee protocol, protocol on deputations, and the guidance on notices of motions, if that guidance is approved today. There's no financial well, there's obviously some legal implications associated in and around standing orders, but nothing of any significance that members should be aware of, other than the fact that mandatory standing orders cannot be amended. And so, members, the recommendations which are before you today are to approve the guidance on notices of motion, to approve the draft standing orders to the extent that they were received unanimous support at the working group, and then to approve one of the options in respect of Standing Order 4.4, Standing Order 16.18, Standing Order 1913, and Standing Order 24.2.
Chair, you're on mute.
Oh, Lord. I'm not now. Thank you for that. There could be different issues that people want to address as we go through this. The first thing I want to ascertain before I bring in the first speakers, 3.1, the items that have been agreed unanimously. Is there anybody contesting any of those, or are we content to move to the issues coming via 3.2 through to 3.7?
Chair, can I get clarification on point G, agreed amendments to Standing Order 21 relates to calling arrangements?
Can we get that as we go through it?
Yeah, Chair, just a point of order. I know Philip said there was that this was unanimous, and I just want to say
sorry, Councillor Harkin.
Yes.
Calling a point of order, you're required to identify the point of order. Which point of order are you calling the point of order under?
Okay. Well, I was going to say that we don't agree with the proposals. It's not unanimous. So if you want to figure out what point of order that is, or somebody else wants to do that, I'll happily look it up now.
That's grand. If we're discussing point of order, we'll use the points of order as we, or use the standing orders as we go through it.
Well, Chair, you were asking if people agreed with the proposal, so
that's different. You're saying you're not agreeing with it. It's not actually a point of order. Do you wish to? Well,
I just want to state for the record that it's not unanimous.
Yep, Councillor Harkin, you're not on. You are on the list. So what I'm going to do now is just move to the councillors on the list in the order that they declared, if that's okay with members. And let's start with Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair, for letting us in. Chair, this has been going round the houses for quite a while. But and I will say, Chair, it's often the independents and the smaller parties, it's often their voice that are representing the most marginalised within this district council. And what I will say is some of the stuff that's on the proposal today could have every possibility that the values that we attain within our council could be very much threatened and undermined, particularly by the larger parties. When we're looking at the possibility, and these are fundamental changes, Chair, that are being considered here. When we're looking around reduction in motions, the ability to bring forward motions, the ability of speaking times, the representation possibly on committees and working groups, there is real possibility that our democratic right could be denied. And I know that Philip says that there's no legal implications, but I think there is many legal implications, and I think there's legal implications for myself as an elected member about voting to possibly deny my constituents representation. So, Chair, I would like to propose that we adjourn, defer this report until I, as an elected member, can get and receive independent legal advice on these fundamental changes before moving forward on them. Chair, and I would like to make that a proposal.
That has been seconded by Councillor Donnelly. I'm referring to Philip on this. I'm seeking legal advice on Councillor Gallagher seeking legal advice. Can you clarify that issue for me, Philip, please?
Well, Chair, the request from Councillor Gallagher is a request for an adjournment, so that's a matter for members as to whether or not they wish to defer this item to another committee.
Thank you, Philip. The proposal is to adjourn, so I think it's best to actually take that now. If we're going to adjourn, we will adjourn.
Can I speak on the proposal?
No, sorry, it is proposed and seconded. I'm simply going to take a vote on whether members wish to adjourn or wish to proceed, and I will ask the Chief Executive to take us through that vote now.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Alderman Breslin?
Against.
Alderman Hussey?
Against.
Alderman McClintock? Alderman McCready?
Against.
Councillor John Boyle?
Against.
Councillor Michaela Boyle?
For.
Councillor Donnelly?
For.
Councillor Duffy?
For.
Councillor Fleming?
For, John.
Councillor Gallagher? Councillor Heaney?
For.
Councillor McKeever?
Against.
Councillor Mooney? Councillor Mooney? Didn't pick you up there.
Against.
Thank you. And Councillor Riley?
Against, Chair.
Thank you. Chair, I have recorded 6 for the proposal and 8 against the proposal, so the proposal falls.
On that basis, we will carry on. Councillor Gallagher, have you anything else to contribute before I move to Councillor Duffy?
Yes, Chair, if I could come back. Chair,
Okay.
these are very legal matters, and what I would say is those that are looking to deny me and my constituents our legal mandate, that there's every potential that because these are fundamental changes in this, that if this goes through today, that there will be a column brought forward, and that the people who are voting against this adjournment are risking a very costly price that will be paid for the calling of external legal advice under 41B of a calling, that they risk further costs to the ratepayer, rather than adjourning this and giving everyone equal opportunity to seek legal opinion. To Chair, this report has come in very quick. We've sought on many occasions legal opinion, and it's taken us months for it to go over and to go through the fine detail. And people want to make a decision today, or seem to be rushing to make an opinion today and get a decision today. And I think it's a complete and utter denial of our elected members' rights, that we have a legal duty to our constituents, and it can't be denied by a vote by the so-called bigger parties. It can't, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. I would remind you that the minutes of this meeting will be discussed at full council, and you will have opportunities to bring the matter again there. This committee will make a recommendation. It is not actually passing that these changes would happen if they are agreed on committee. Councillor Duffy.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. And I would just like to point out to Councillor Gallagher there, when he's talking about the bigger parties, we voted in support of your proposal. I think that has gone over your head in terms of trying to get your narrative out there around being oppressed and censored. We very much are opposed to that, and we want to see this being taken forward in a really inclusive way that ensures that the business that we have to do is done in an efficient manner, where everybody's voice is heard and everybody's voice is represented within the chamber. And that's where we want, that's the point that we want to get to. So that's why we supported your proposal there in terms of adjourning it to a later time. But we are where we are, and as Alderman Hussey has pointed out, we will revisit this at full council. I have absolutely no doubt about it. But in terms of this being sprung upon us, we have been talking about this now for a very, very long time. We have met a number of times as a working group. We have met as a full special council to look at this. So this hasn't been sprung on anybody. We have had ample time to be looking at these things. Now, I know today that in terms of any proposals that I put forward, it's highly unlikely I'll get everything that I think that it should be in terms of moving forward. But my starting point in all this is to make the business of council more efficient and to make our time more useful in how we go about our business. Because to see, if you ask anybody on the street, in terms of our full council meetings, sitting from 4 o'clock to 20 to 1 in the morning, people think that we're idiots. You know, people go, what are you be talking about? What have you sorted out? What have you done? So, you know, in terms of that, that is something that we do really need to be addressing, and making sure that the public know the work that we're doing and know the value of the work that we're doing. Sitting for 8.5 hours isn't always the best use of anyone's time, in terms of when you have constituents that want their housing issues sorted, they want their drains sorted, they want practical things coming from their councillors. So, you know, sitting for 8.5 hours isn't always the most practical use of time. But I digress. I go on to the recommendations as they stand. I'm going to take them one by one, if you allow me, Chair, and I'm not going to overly discuss them. 5.1. Happy with that, that we take that forward as we had discussed it at the previous meeting. 5.2, the same. 5.3, in terms of standing orders 4.4, we would be happy to support A. We think that 24 hours is adequate for bringing forward issues under chairperson's business. I don't think that it should be 48 hours or longer. We have an extensive period, a cut-off period for bringing in motions. So I don't think that when matters arise that need to be discussed within the chamber, I don't think that we should push it back any further than 24 hours. I think that that's adequate. In terms of 5.4, the standing order 16.1, absolutely not, don't agree with that at all. We have mandates to be in the chamber. We have mandates to raise issues for our constituents and to be limited to 3 motions in any 12-month period. I don't think is a good way of fulfilling that function. I think that, you know, do you decide 1 month I'm not going to raise this because something more important might come up the next month? So no, as a party will not be supporting that. 5.5, we would be happy to go with B, 3 minutes introducing a motion and 2 minutes in replying. Think that that's adequate in terms of a debate. I have a feeling that we're not going to get that one through and people are going to go for 5 and 3. Really don't have an issue if that's what happens, but in terms of our own thoughts on it, you know, if an issue is important to you, 3 minutes is probably a good enough time frame to get your points across and to keep people's attention on it. 5.6, in respect to standing order 24.2, I don't believe either option should be accepted. As a party, we would be happy enough with the status quo in terms of 6 months. I don't see why we would need to change that. It doesn't come up that often in terms of expediting the work of us as a council, and 6 months is an adequate time frame. Things can come up again within the course of a year. Things can change. So I would be happy, and I would be happy to reject both those and stay with the status quo in terms of the 6 months. Those are my thoughts at this point. So happy to hear other people's, but I would like to put on record our thanks to Philip and the team who have been working their way through this. It hasn't been an easy thing to do when there are so many diverse opinions in the chamber. So I would thank him for that. But those are our initial thoughts on it. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy, and I'm sure yourself and others will realise I was a bit lenient on time there, but it is an important issue, and it was on that basis that I was. So, Alderman McClintock, Hilary.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's quite lengthy to get through within the time. But first of all, can I say that I would like to give Philip the thanks for bringing this forward to us. It has not been an easy task, and certainly I respect the legal opinion of our legal officers, and I don't think we need any other legal opinion on it. Neither will we be threatened by the possibility of a call-in. That's what happens. That's what happens. Just to go through the points quickly, I suppose efficiency is the big thing. We need to have efficiency in the way forward, and I think the previous speaker spoke about it. We're becoming a laughing stock out there. People are saying, what on earth are you talking for 8 and 9 hours for? We really are becoming a laughing stock, so we really have to do something about that. We had another meeting last Thursday that went on for a considerable length of time. But to fly on through this, 5.1 and 5.2, certainly happy with those. 5.3, the chairperson's business. Our preference would be 2 working days rather than hours, certainly in whatever form this may come back, because obviously just coming from a bank holiday weekend and the difficulties if something comes out on a Friday, you know, working days doesn't give much. If it's hours, it doesn't give much time. So working days, certainly the preference for 48 hours for chairperson's business. 5.4, we do believe, the DUP does believe that there should be a cap on the number of motions that any one member can bring forward. Our reasoning for this is very simple. We believe that we should translate the vote proportionately, as is the Hunt system, the process, and that all 40 members should have an equal opportunity, rather than smaller parties feeling that they are disenfranchised. Every single member would have the same opportunity. 5.5, I suppose, just to say that democracy means that that parties with a large number of members should have a better possibility of putting through notices of motion. 5.5, we believe that 3 minutes and 2 minutes is more than adequate. I think you lose attention if we go on any longer than that, and won't rehearse that. We're happy with 3 minutes and 2 minutes going forward. that's 5.6. If there's a change in when a matter can be raised again, our preference would be for 12 months, certainly not within the term of the council, but reasonably happy with 6 months as well. So could be persuaded on either of those. The other thing that I don't think that has been mentioned, Philip, and I would like to bring it, and maybe I have missed this, is relevancy. I really feel that the whole issue of relevancy is very, very important. And I mean, it's Standing Order 16, I believe, every motion shall be relevant to some matter in which the council has power of duties. But it's this bit of is not prevented. Now, I don't think you've made any changes there at all, but that's certainly one I feel that we need to be looking at. Part 2 that directly affects the local government district and its residents, and Part 3 for which the committee are legally competent. But I feel that it's almost a cop-out for us, the fact that we say we're not prevented from doing it. And I certainly would like more discussion around that point. And I think in a nutshell, that is probably it, flying through that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock, and thanks for your expediency in moving through that. Definitely complex issues that we're dealing with here. Councillor Doyle, Emmett.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in, and thanks, Philip, for the report. Although there are certainly aspects of it that I and Aintu have serious concerns about. In relation to the issue around shares business, like 24 hours is fine. I think that's reasonable. 16.18, with regards to limiting the number of motions that a member can bring, I have to respectfully disagree with Hilary. It doesn't bring around any fairness, in the sense that it would actually limit me to 3 and limit, for example, a party of 11 to 33. So that is not equitable. I have to say that I'm absolutely horrified to think that in the city that gave this island civil rights, that I genuinely have to sit here today and listen to people try and limit the input that I have into this council. Now, yes, I'm a co-opted member, but my party has a mandate here that we were elected by the people of Ballyarnett, and every other single member in this council should be treated exactly the same as I am. I don't want to be treated any better than anyone else. And it is not acceptable for what I think is around 35% of the membership of this council to have less rights than the larger parties. Now, one of the things that, I understand, and look, I don't like sitting to 20 to 1 in the morning either, because like many of our other members, I have to get up the next morning for work. I get that. But if we're talking really about efficiency here, I look back over the last number of council meetings, and actually the vast majority of motions come from larger parties. So if we're really interested in efficiency, let's limit the number of motions the larger parties can bring, because I will only ever bring one, because that's what I can bring. The independents can only bring as many as their number, but the larger parties, I mean, I've pulled a number of papers up here, and there are some parties that have put together 3 and 4 different motions from different members. That's their right. I sit up to 21 because they deserve to be heard. I have no doubt that the issues that members from across this council are bringing forward are important to them and the people they serve. So since when is the issues that I want to bring less important? Why do they have to wait? I've brought a motion forward at every council that I have since I have been a member of this council, apart from in December. Every one of them has been passed. They're not political. They're about things along the lines of addiction, around homelessness, around policing, the things that affect every single community in this city and district. And to hear anybody trying to say that in the interests of efficiency, I shouldn't be allowed to do that more than 3 times in a year, it's blatant gerrymandering. And I use that term deliberately. And I can't see, for whatever reason, any party would have an excuse to use it to limit my ability to represent the people who voted for my party. What it comes down to is, if this is a matter of efficiency, let's go and talk about the time that is taken up by motions from larger parties. Because let's be frank, if members, for example, of the SDLP or Sinn Féin, the larger parties here, and the DUP wanted to bring a motion from every single member, they're entitled to do that. I am entitled to the same rights, no less, than any other member or grouping in this council. And I have to say, with regards to what Paul Gallagher has put forward here tonight, if this progresses, Intu will be only too happy to put their name to a call-in, because it is anti-democratic and it cannot be allowed to stand. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Joy. Back up to my list. Councillor Riley, Martin.
Thanks, Chair, for bringing me in. And I suppose I addressed the first point in relation to the suggested adjournment of this. I think that it is appropriate to point out that this committee is not a decision-making body. It refers its business to full council, and only then is it ratified or not at full council. So any councillor of any party or independent can obtain whatever legal advice they wish, and would be quite happy for people to do that and to have that information brought to full council whenever the minutes from this committee are to be ratified. In relation to second reason for not supporting an adjournment of this today, I think from the contributions you've heard so far, there are some elements of agreement that people have, and it might be useful to persist with some of those to try and get agreement on particular issues, and I think that that's the right way to handle this. It is a case that this item has been in, as the city solicitor outlined, a number of various different working groups, which were open to all 40 councillors to attend. Those councillors who did attend have spent a lot of time debating this, discussing it, helping officers with their thoughts, and in fairness to the officers, they have to be thanked for not only that piece of work, but then bringing forward options. I use that word crucially. These are options for people to think about and then decide on. So thanks to the officers for doing that piece of work. In relation to what's before us today, Chairperson, as others have said in relation to 5.1, I think yes, our party would be supportive of that. In relation to 5.2, yes, we would be supportive of that as well. In relation to the 5.3, the options of the notice of chair's business, we can see merit in the various options for different reasons, but as others have said, we think 24 hours is sufficient for people to be given the chair notice that they want to bring forward an item for discussion. In relation to 5.4, and that's the one that seems to be the most contentious here this afternoon, our party is also, as others said, opposed to introducing a limit to 3 motions per person per year. We don't think that that is fair on any of the parties or any of the independents in this chamber. There are 40 people, all of us in this virtual chamber, because of a mandate that each of us have received, and therefore people should be entitled to put forward their views on issues that matter to them and their constituents. So we're not in favour of 5.4, which would introduce a cap or a limit on those types of issues that want to be brought forward. The previous speaker to me, Councillor Doyle, has touched on the fact that that a lot of the parties do table motions, but the way the motions are written is such that they come in from individually named councillors of a political party. So I agree with Councillor Doyle in the sense that it's open to councillors, be they independent, be they be part of a smaller party, or be they part of a larger party. Everybody should have the right to table a motion for debate on a matter that's relevant to them and their constituents. In terms of item 5, 5.5, the options and the ability, the time is required. We would be of the opinion of the
5 minutes to, sorry, the 3 minutes to wind or to propose, and then 2 minutes. But we're not precious on that. But we know from the past number of council meetings that we've had, not everybody takes the full 5 minutes to speak to an item. Not everybody uses their full 3 minutes to wind it up. You know, it's not something that we're precious on either way. But I think 3 minutes and 2 minutes is sufficient for somebody to put forward their point of view. And as I said, not everybody uses the full 3 minutes currently. And then in the final point, Chair, in relation to 5.6, you know, there's the existing system, the 6 months system, we think is fair enough. We don't see any need to change that, to extend it out. You know, 6 months is a sufficient period of time for any issue, no matter how big or how small it is. There may have been changes in it, there may be a different angle or a different approach required in relation to it. So we're, as others have said, content enough to leave that one without any adjustment to it. So, Chair, that's where we stand on the various issues. Conscious that this is a committee that makes recommendations to council. So anything that is agreed today can be picked at and looked at again in due course at full council. But that's where we would stand. And to reiterate, because there has been a range of commentary here on social media in advance of today's meeting, that the SDLP are clearly respectful of the mandate of every single person in this virtual chamber, be they independent, be they a small party, or be they one of the larger parties, because we all have a mandate to represent the constituents who voted to put us into this virtual chamber. And the sooner we can arrive back into a physical chamber to have the debates in person, I think would be welcome as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. And again, re-emphasising your final parts of the comment there. It's not a decision been made by this committee, it's a recommendation going to full council. Councillor Harkin, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, this is a very important discussion of great importance, and we supported Councillor Gallagher's proposal because we actually think it's important for our constituents to be able to see these proposals, because the reaction that I've seen so far from many of the people we represent, but not even people we represent, people who would have voted for other parties, is people don't think that this is the right direction for our council to go in. People see this as censorship, limiting democracy, and very much a counter democratic move. And I think we have to put it in a broader context. It strikes me as very interesting that simultaneous to this proposal being brought forward here, that there's a similar proposal that would also impact on the smaller parties and independents in the Belfast City Council. I find that interesting, and I think a lot of people who are looking at this situation find it interesting as well. I'm not saying that there's coordination, but one might be led down that road. So look, there is a context as well where we've got some political parties in crisis. We have a huge frustration with the Stormont government. And what we see then is a series of proposals that would, at the end of the day, mostly impact smaller parties like People Before Profit and the independent councillors. And so, you know, Philip said at the start that this was unanimous, and what we find is that there's no agreement at all to move this forward. So I don't know if that is a result of the reaction, as Councillor Riley said, already on social media to these proposals. Otherwise, I do not really understand how these proposals got even here. Some of these proposals should have been dismissed at the working group. I don't actually understand how they're getting here. But what's very clear is that the DUP want to put a cap on democracy. They want to limit people's ability to speak and bring issues to the council. They've consistently described issues that many councillors have raised as trivial because they don't happen to support them. And so when they don't support an issue, it's trivial, it doesn't relate, and so on. And what it really amounts to is the DUP are leading the charge here and trying to shut people down, shut down the ability of people to raise important issues. And Hillary says that the council's a laughingstock. RHI was a laughingstock, but it wasn't a funny one in the sense that it cost us hundreds of millions of pounds.
Councillor Harkin, outside of our remit, then we stick to the issue that we're actually discussing, please. Thank you.
I've made my point, thank you, Chair. But that the council, for many people, this is local government. This is where people get the opportunity to see issues raised. And I find the vast majority of people who see the issues that are raised in this council are glad to see them raised. People want us to keep the political establishment accountable. One of the ways that we do it is raising the issues that we've raised that do relate to our council. People want to see action here. People can see the gap between what happens at Stormont and what happens at our local council in terms of votes. People vote one way in Belfast, another way in the Derry and Strabane Council. And so this is all very important in terms of how democracy works and not allowing things to be covered up and hidden away. We had important discussions last week that we weren't able to have votes on about possible political manipulation of COVID community funding and etc. These are all vitally important. And if the councillors who are trying to raise this are denied a platform, it has repercussions right across. And I would say to Philip and to the senior council officers that there would be legal repercussions to some of these proposals that are included within. So we're not on this committee, obviously, so we won't be able to vote, but we would be rejecting the guts of the recommendations coming out of it today. And obviously we are expressing our frustration and anger really at the types of proposals that have been allowed to progress here that are truly anti-democratic, that would that are not about civil rights, and that would deny many of the people who voted for us and voted for others their mandate to be heard in this council. And that would have been limited if these recommendations went forward to full council today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harkin. Councillor Barr, Raymond.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me in. I'm not a member of this committee, but I'd just like to comment on 5.4 as well. Limiting members to 3 notices of motion. I do feel there's a concerted effort by some parties to effectively sideline and disenfranchise independents and small party members. Limiting each member to 3 motions a year is clearly aimed at these independents and minority groupings in council. And to me, it's a thin edge of the wedge. With more sanctions to come, proposals like this are successful. This comes hot in the heels of talk within Belfast Council of the setting up of a committee to veto council motions. It will be, sorry, we don't expedite business or improve efficiency by depriving other councillors of a democratic right to represent their constituents. This proposed change does not limit the major parties and their ability to represent their constituents, but it certainly does independents and small parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Raymond. Thank you, Councillor Barr. Very much thank you for being straight to the point there. Much appreciated. Just checking my own list here. Councillor Donnelly, Derry.
Thank you, Chair. And it looks like there's a bit of backpedaling going on here, because the only people I would love to see the minutes from the working group, because the DUP didn't come up with all these on their own. There's been some comments made here tonight, and I think they're a bit insulting for some people to talk about laughing stocks and already say, what are these idiots? I went before the electorate, I got a mandate, and to me, this my duty. Once a month, we sit in a council meeting, and it goes on sometimes late. But I think when we give that commitment to the electorate, that's your first priority, and that's where I don't see, or I haven't talked to anybody that sees councillors working to the small heirs as being idiots. In fact, it would be the opposite. It would be a bit of admiration for them. Now, I think it's a bit bizarre here that there's parties here who are putting similar proposals in Belfast about weeding out motions, but yet have a different stance here. I also believe that there's a stance here, particularly by the SDLP, where they see themselves as a big party, and they talk about inclusion in that, but their councillors in Belfast are the victims of the very same undemocratic process. Now, I think there's something very wrong here. If it's not broke, why are we fixing it? What is this all about? The DUP aren't on their own here. And for the DUP, they try and tell us what's relevant and what's not relevant is an absolute disgrace. And I think this is the beginning of a slippery slope, and it needs to be opposed very, very vigorously. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Alderman McCready.
Excuse me, Gordon. Thanks, Chair. Just some observations. Firstly, can I welcome the debate, the input, the democratic input from all members, and even those who are not on the committee but feel passionate about all aspects. And this is the exact format, process, vehicle, platform, soapbox to do it on. I encourage them to keep doing it. There's no issues with democracy with myself and my party. Let's keep it going. It's amicable. And we've all in pursuit of either a mandate, your own aims, or that for the electorate. 2 points specifically, Chair. The first one is on equitable or equality within the chamber. And the second one I'll come on to about relevance. We talk about equality, and it's a term which it does get used quite often, sometimes out of context, sometimes inappropriately. But when we talk about equitable outcomes for members on standing orders, or if anything moves forward on this, the key point on equitable or equality in this case, irrespective of what we agree on moving forward, it applies equally to all members. Members on this group have said that they have a mandate. I agree, absolutely. Use it as best you can. What's not taken into account or consideration at this point is everything in council is based on proportionate representation of the electorate. You can't dismiss that, and you can't throw it out to say, oh, well, it's irrelevant. It is an absolute fact. And the good thing is it changes. The electorate dictate how many seats the DUP get, Sinn Féin, smaller parties, or an independent who's only going for one seat. And to somehow try and conflate that to say that we're crushing or minimizing people's democratic right to talk on motions, it's based on you as an individual, as a member, who've secured a seat. It just so happens if you're a member of a political party, then you have more seats. But as I say, it goes up and down, thankfully. The last point on relevance, Chair, if I may, is I do take the points. Nobody has come on here and saying, look, some of the points are idiotic. Hillary mentioned what people and her electorate in her area have said on Facebook. So that's a quote. And they're entitled to say that however they deem. But we talk about relevance, and there was a reference in the standing orders, and in a lot of cases, and when you look at the motions within the last 18 months, Chair, an overwhelming majority of the motions are outside of the council remit, jurisdiction, council area, and we've got absolutely no measure to or measure the impact, the effectiveness, or have we achieved anything but by putting that motion forward. So in terms of relevance, and it is open to interpretation, which I get, but relevance within standing orders is this really going to be the good and benefit for your electorate inside your council, city and district area? That's certainly open for debate. And I'll draw that at a close. But here, Chair, it's all there, all for input, all for debate. So thanks very much for letting me partake.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. Councillor Gallagher has requested to speak again, and I was minded to say he'd already spoken, but he said he hasn't spoken on the content of the report. I've thought on it. Councillor Gallagher did speak with regard to his proposal to adjourn. I will allow Councillor Gallagher back in Councillor Gallagher on the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for letting us back in. And there, as I said earlier, Chair, there's quite a few motions, or there's quite a few potential amendments that are on here that are quite fundamental, and they're quite fundamental that, in my opinion, they go against the grain and the values that Council set out. There's an important element, Chair, in the Local Government Act 2014, and that is a call-in and the process of a call-in. And it is there, and it's designed as I believe as a protection for the smaller parties and for the independents, that the larger parties can't run away with themselves, that we have a legal avenue. And Chair, and I would ask members, and I'm shocked, I am shocked at the DUP, who would claim time and time again to say that there are a minority community within the council area. And I say to them, do you see, when you go out and face your electorate and you tell them that you have disenfranchised them, you have reduced the representation further on this council, then I think they will get a kickback on that. To the SDLP, this is about, this committee is about making recommendations that will go forward to full council. But we have to sit and we have to have an opportunity to look at the reports, evaluate the reports, get details on the reports, and when necessary, to seek outside advice on those reports in order to be able to make a recommendation that goes forward. I feel that I haven't had equal opportunities, and they can dress it up whatever way they want to, but this is disenfranchising me, and it's disenfranchising my mandate as a democratic right to seek further advice. And the vote that they've taken early has denied me that right. Thank you, Chair. And Chair, I'll not be sustaining and partaking in any vote on these matters here.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. I am minded that this has been a long ongoing process. With my not being in council for a while, I haven't been on board with that working group, but we have the recommendations in front of us. And I'm going to take these recommendations through, not en bloc, but as they stand there. So firstly, members, I'm asking for a vote on each of these if the Chief Executive can be prepared for the series of votes. And the first one is the recommendation 5.1 for or against, that members approve the guidance and notice of motions. That's the first proposal. So Chief Executive, if you can take us through for or against on recommendation 5.1.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Alderman Breslin. Alderman Breslin. Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman McCready.
For.
Councillor John Boyle. Councillor John Boyle.
Yep, for.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
Won't be taking part in any of these votes either.
Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Not in a position to take a vote.
Councillor Heaney. Councillor Heaney. Councillor McKeever.
For.
Councillor Mooney.
For.
Councillor Riley.
4.
Thank you, members.
John,
Sorry, is that Alderman Breslin?
yes. What I was answering the phone there. What he's voting for now?
We're voting, John, on recommendation 5.1. We're taking the recommendations through, not taking it all in block. So it's recommendation 5.1, for or against. Members approve guidance and notice of motions.
For John, sorry. For.
Thank you. Chair, I've recorded 11 for and 2 members with comments that I'll seek Philip's advice on whether they should be recorded as abstentions or not.
Philip?
Yeah, Chair, those would be recorded as abstentions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. That's 11 members for, none against, and 2 abstentions. So 5.1's recommendation passes.
Thank you. Recommendation 5.2.
Chair, before you move on.
Hold.
Yeah.
I'm seeking clarification on 5.2. It talks here about the draft standing orders, and yet below it there are changes that are being suggested to the standing orders. So, for clarification, is 5.2 dependent on whatever is decided in 5.3, 4, 5, 6, etc.?
Yeah, Chair, the 5.2 is intended to convey a proposal to accept all of the changes in standing orders other than those ones which are subject to separate ratification in 5.3 to 5.6.
That's okay, as long as we have that clarification. So, sorry, Councillor Duffy?
Chair, it was just on item 5.6 prior to you take a day vote, because there's 2 options there, but there is a third option that I know that Councillor Riley and Alderman McClintock were supportive of, in terms of we just stay with status quo. So how do we take forward that vote in terms of we stick with the 6 months rather than changing it?
Can I deal with that when we get to 5.6, Councillor Duffy? Because we have a similar situation in 5.3.
Chair, might I suggest under 5.3, where there are 3 options, that if you're wishing to take forward a vote, you might wish to seek a proposal on one of them and then vote on that.
I'm happy to propose 5.3A.
Sorry, before we get there, can we deal with 5.2, which is the draft standing orders except for those that have to be determined under 5.3? Again, for or against on 5.2.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Alderman Breslin? Alderman Breslin?
For.
Alderman Hussey?
For.
Alderman McClintock? Alderman McCready?
For.
Councillor John Boyle?
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle?
For.
Councillor Donnelly? Councillor Donnelly? Councillor Duffy?
For.
Councillor Fleming?
For, John.
Councillor Gallagher?
Not in a position.
Councillor Heaney? Councillor McKeever?
For.
Councillor Mooney? Councillor Mooney?
For, John.
Councillor Riley?
For, John.
Thank you. Chair, I have recorded 11 for, none against, and 1 abstention. So 5.2 passes.
Thank you, John. I'm now going to suggest to members on 5.3 ABC that we take a vote and members declare which one they support, A, B, or C. If any one of those achieves more than 50% of the committee, that is the one which will be going forward as the committee recommendation. If none of them have received that 50%, the one which is lowest be excluded, and then we go to a straight vote between the two that are remaining. Would members be content with dealing with it in that way? And before maybe that, Philip, would you see that as a reasonable way to deal with 5.3?
Chair, reasonable, yes, but I'm not sure that it accords with the current standing orders that we have. Unfortunately, I think the correct approach would be to seek a proposal in respect of one of the three options at the present time.
Right. Can I have a proposal then?
Chair, I'm happy to propose option A.
Option A proposed no later than 24 hours. There'll be a seconder, seconded by Councillor Boyle. We have that proposal. Is there any amendment? Members, option A has been proposed. For and against, John?
Alderman Breslin. Alderman Breslin.
For.
Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman McClintock.
For.
Alderman McCready.
For.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Not in a position to vote.
Councillor Heaney. Councillor McKeever.
For.
Councillor Mooney.
For.
Councillor Riley.
For.
Thank you, members. Chair, I've recorded for 5.3A, 11 for, none against, and 1 abstention. So 5.3A passes.
5.3A will be the recommendation going to full council. 5.4 for or against. John?
Alderman Breslin. Sorry, Alderman Breslin, could you say again, please?
Against.
Against. Alderman Hussey.
Against.
Alderman McClintock. Alderman McCready.
Against.
Councillor John Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Against.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Duffy. Councillor Fleming.
Against, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Not in a position to cast a vote.
Councillor Heaney. Councillor McKeever.
Against.
Councillor Mooney.
Against, John.
Councillor Riley.
Against, John.
Thank you, members. So, Chair, I've recorded none for, 11 against, and 1 abstention. So, by that, 5.4, there is no confirmation that members wish to insert Standing Order 16.18 into 16.18, the condition set out in 5.4.
That recommendation does not go forward. For clarification, that means actually that there is no change to the present circumstances.
Okay.
Right, despite some people actually wanting it and not prepared to support that particular recommendation, or even the turning down of that recommendation. The next one, speaking time, 5.5. Again, we have 2 suggested recommendations. The first A or B, again, it probably means we're going to have somebody proposing either A or B. Before that vote is taken, I'm very lax myself to actually move from the current situation that we have of 10 minutes, but that's for others to determine. And I do want to remind folk that winding up is a chance to respond to the comments that have been made to your motion. And effectively, you could have 39 comments from your colleagues to a motion that you propose. And if we're restricted, for example, even to 3 minutes, you would have, what, 4, 5, 6 seconds to respond to each comment? Well, whatever members determine, can I have a proposal reference 5.5?
Chair, John Boyle here.
Councillor Boyle?
Yep, Chair. Notwithstanding everything that you have said, but we're very firmly of the view that this at least should be tried. And that's one of the interesting things about this. You know, this one in particular could be re-amended at some time in the future if it was felt that it wasn't working. But I will be proposing that we accept recommendation B, Chair. For the record, that is to present for 3 minutes and then to sum up for 2 minutes.
Proposed and have we a seconder?
Yeah, happy to second.
Who's proposing or sorry, seconding?
Sandra, Councillor Duffy.
Councillor Duffy. Councillor Duffy seconding. John, to the vote.
Sorry, excuse me. Alderman Breslin.
B, John.
So that is 4, Alderman Breslin, yes?
Yes.
Alderman Hussey.
Against.
Alderman McClintock. Alderman McClintock.
4, John.
Alderman McCready.
4.
Councillor John Boyle.
4.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
4, John.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Duffy.
4.
Councillor Fleming.
4, John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Nothing was cast the vote.
Councillor Heaney. Councillor McKeever.
4.
Councillor Mooney.
4, John.
Councillor Riley.
4, John.
Thank you, members. Chair, I've recorded 10 for, 1 against, and 1 abstention, so that proposal passes.
The recommendation going to full council is that 5.5B will be that recommended to full council. And finally, 5.6 in respect of standing order 24.2.
Chair, John Boyle again.
Councillor Boyle?
Chair,
Yeah,
I was on
I
before.
think Councillor Duffy and I are probably going to be talking about the same thing anyway, and that's the clarity around the suggestion that actually we might remain with the status quo. Perhaps the city solicitor advises. If so, I feel it would be appropriate for perhaps me to make a proposal in that manner, and it becomes option C. And then obviously somebody else could potentially second that. That may be the cleanest way of doing it, Chair.
There is the potential, I would presume, for somebody to propose that 5.6 be rejected in its totality.
Chair, whatever way we want to have it, just in terms of that third option, if Councillor Boyle, which is what I was coming in to do, was going to propose that we keep the standing order as is, I would be happy to second that. Or if he wants to word it in that we reject these recommendations and stay with what we have, I'm also happy to second that.
I think
Chair, if I may suggest, the proposal would be simply that Standing Order 24.2 is not changed.
Chair, on the basis of the information and the advice from the city solicitor, then that's what I am proposing, that we do not change that standing order, as just mentioned.
And seconded by Councillor Duffy. Members clear? John?
Thank you, Chair. Alderman Breslin.
For John.
Alderman Hussey.
For.
Alderman McClintock.
For John.
Alderman McCready.
For.
Councillor John Boyle.
For.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
For.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Duffy. Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Fleming.
For John.
Councillor Gallagher.
For.
Councillor Heaney. Councillor McKeever.
For John.
Councillor Mooney.
For John.
Councillor Riley.
For John.
Thank you, members. Chair, I've recorded 12 for, no against, and no abstentions. So that proposal passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Philip, a sincere thank you for what is a very trying, obviously, item on the agenda. We've had a very full and forthright discussion on it. The recommendations will go to full council and their decisions will be made. Thank you for your input, Philip. I'm suggesting now, members, that we take a quick recess and resume at 7 p.m. And I trust that members are content with that. We are now adjourned until 7 p.m. Thank you, members. Thank you, members. Meeting is resumed and we're moving to agenda item 11. Not sure, is that Ellen taking that?
Yes, through you, Chair. Are you happy for me to start?
Yep, we've meetings in session again, so over to you, Ellen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is that, subject to members' comments, is to seek approval for the release of the consultation on the draft improvement objectives for the 21-22 year. As highlighted in the particular committee report, Part 12 of the Local Government Act 2014 puts a requirement on councils to have a framework to support community or continuous improvement, in the delivery of council services. And as part of that obligation, councils need to publish a performance improvement plan and also to consult with stakeholders on improvement objectives, which are actually set out in the plan. Our current or previous plan and performance improvement plan set out 4 improvement objectives, but in the context of COVID, we've revisited those, particularly in the context of, as I say, 2 of our current improvement objectives relate to focusing on delivering economic and visitor growth and also on developing healthy lifestyles, and they've also, as I say, been impacted in the last year due to COVID. The draft corporate and improvement plan for 21-22 is set out in Appendix 2 of your reports, and it recognises the changes in the operational environment and sets out, as I say, 3 updated versions of the existing improvement objectives, which link back to our community plan and introduce a dedicated COVID recovery improvement objectives. They're set out, as I say, in terms of the report under item 3.3, and subject to members' comments tonight, it's proposed that the consultation on the improvement objectives commences as soon as practicable, so as to garner stakeholder views, and an update on the results of that consultation will be brought back to members before the final corporate and improvement plan for 21-22 is actually approved. I would highlight, as I say, in terms of the implications of it, there is a statutory requirement to have the improvement objectives and the improvement plan actually approved by council by the end of June and published on the website. So again, as I say, subject to members' comments, the recommendation is to release for approval the draft improvement objectives set out in the corporate improvement plan. Thank you, members.
Members, Alderman McCready, Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to welcome the report and note the contents and approve. Clearly there it states we're a statutory obligation, so happy to carry out that function and oblige.
Okay.
Is that the recommendation proposed, Alderman McCready?
Yes, Chair.
Happy second, Chair.
Seconded, Councillor Riley. Any other member? Anyone against? The recommendation is agreed by committee. Thank you very much. Item 12, yourself again, Ellen. Are you on mute, Ellen?
Sorry, through you, Chair. The purpose of this particular report is to seek elected members' approval in relation to the continued membership of a number of organisations or associations. And as indicated in the report, the council currently subscribes to a range of organisations that support local government or council endorsed activities, and in many cases elected members take part in activities or play a role in the governance of these bodies. The report itself identifies Noga, who we've heard from this evening, the National Association of Councillors, Friends of the Somme membership, APSI membership, and also membership of the Northern Ireland Local Government Partnership on Travellers' Issues. There is budget provision for these particular associations, and if members require further information, happy to bring back a report. But the recommendation in front of members today is that, subject to your comments, that membership of the organisations and associations identified in this report is maintained for 21-22. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman McClintock. Hillary.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to propose a recommendation just to keep the status quo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Alderman McCready in the chat box seconding the proposal. Any member wish to comment? Any member against? Happy then, the recommendation goes forward. And again, Ellen, you're busy. Item 13.
Yes, through you, Chair. Purpose of this report is to present members with updated information on council signing up to the British Irish Sign Language Charter, and also seek endorsement of the approach required to actually progress that charter. So as indicated as well in the report, there was a council motion back in 2019 which gave support to the council signing up on the British Irish Sign Language Charter and to bring forward a report. That report was subsequently brought forward in September 2019, and members gave approval to engage with the British Deaf Association in taking forward the charter. As indicated under key issues, there are 5 pledges, two of which are mandatory, and we have actually sort of spoken to BDA on the basis of going forward with the first 2 pledges, and they relate to consulting formally and informally with the local deaf community, and also ensuring access for deaf people to information and services from the council. We have, in terms of, as I say, trying to take this forward, had planned a number of engagement opportunities with members of the deaf community, but because of the COVID situation, the focus of the organisations that people were involved with was on supporting their community during the pandemic, and therefore were unavailable to engage with actual council officers. More recently, we've got re-engaged again with the British Deaf Association, and they have put forward proposals as outlined in the paper in terms of a 2-stage approach to advancing the charter, and also submitted relevant costs. Those costs are identified under section 4 and total £3,655. The projected costs, as indicated again in the report, will be covered through reprogramming within the Democratic Services budget, and the recommendation in front of members this evening is subject to your comments that the approach and costs outlined above are approved in order to progress work on the British Irish Sign Language Charter. Thank you, members.
Alderman McCready. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the report. It's really good to see the progress and the detail of work which has been carried out to date. It only seems months ago that Member Rachel Ferguson initiated the original motion, which I was very good to second. I thought it was unanimous across the board, and fundamentally we're at a point where we're progressing something on which will make our services more reachable, more accessible to those who have got issues with hearing or impairment, or part of the deaf society. So great stuff. I have no issues with the outline of projected costs absorbed through member services. It's a relatively small cost to the absolutely huge benefit that this will give those and the aforementioned groups. So good work. I'm looking forward to see this progress further, and would like to propose this recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. The proposed and seconded by Councillor Mooney. Sean, do you wish to speak to this?
Yes, Chair, just briefly, just like to thank
Go ahead.
thank officers for the report, and just like to echo Alderman McCready's comments. Obviously, this changed from the motion that was brought last Thursday by Councillor Ferguson. So absolutely welcome the report, the content, and hopefully go some way to assisting our residents in our community who suffer from deafness and those sort of issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. Right. I note that Councillor Ferguson is on the call. As you most recently had raised this issue, Rachel, do you wish to comment briefly on it?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the offer. I want to thank Alan for the report, and I really appreciate that this has been progressed. I'm ecstatic to see that this has come forward from the 2019 motion, which was for Council to sign up to the charter. So just thank you very much for this, and thank you for the members who proposed and seconded. And I think it's very timely, especially after the recent motion there on Thursday, where again we highlighted the need for more access to BSL, ISL, and being more inclusive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. It's been proposed and seconded. I haven't heard any against. I'm declaring that recommendation passed and going on to Council. Ellen, again on agenda item 14. Ellen.
Yes, through you, Chair. This report aims to present members with details of the Council's Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report for 2021 and to seek comments and approval for the same. As indicated in the report, the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs has issued guidance in terms of public authorities' implementation of their duties under the Rural Needs Act Northern Ireland 2016. Specifically, there are two main duties that public authorities have, which is to have due regard to rural needs and also to monitor and report on how the due regard duty has been exercised. As indicated, the Council has introduced the Rural Needs Impact Assessment process, which has been set out for us by DAERA, and indeed the document is contained at Appendix 1 in relation to the 2021 year. Now, I would highlight to members that we can't change that template, and it must be submitted to DAERA prior to the 30th of June deadline. In terms of the financial and other implications, the rural assessment now, as indicated, that it is being mainstreamed into our policy or service screening processes, and therefore will help ensure that people with needs living in rural communities have those fully considered and addressed. And subject to members' comments again today, the recommendation is that the Rural Needs Annual Monitoring Report is approved and submitted to DAERA. Thank you, members.
Members for comment. Nobody's seeking in on my screen unless I'm missing anyone. Have I a proposal reference to the recommendation?
Proposed, Chair, Jim McKeever.
Deputy Second Chair, Councillor Mooney.
Proposed, Councillor McKeever, seconded, Councillor Mooney. No other comment. Hearing nobody against. Members content and agreed. Recommendation on item 14 going. In a minute, okay, Noga update. Strategic Business Manager. Alan, are you taking this one?
Chair, these items are for information, the remaining items.
Okay.
Chair.
Alderman McCready.
I'm happy to take item 15 as read and just note it.
Okay. So are we, all of items 14, sorry, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, are they all for information?
Yes, Chair, they are.
I'm sorry, I'm just getting through to this here. Okay. And are there any confidential minutes?
No, Chair, they're not.
Right. So item 16, Alderman McCready.
Chair, just to briefly comment and thanks officers for the report. And clearly, rural issues is one that I'm passionate about, along with kind of rural-based councillors up and down the city and district. And I just want to just note and say thanks that the kind of correlation of issues raised are now being thrashed out within the rural issues working group. So welcome the progress. Looking forward to moving things forward again. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Alderman McCready. Any other comment from any other councillor on the items for information? Before I close the meeting then, just to agree with Alderman McCready on the rural issues item, as you would expect, given my comments generally both on committees and in full council. It's a very welcome development that the rural issues are coming more to the fore. Before I close the meeting, members, can I say thank you to all members for the forbearance with me as chair of committee. That will change after the AGM, and I wish whoever the incoming chair is well as they move into the tenure of chair of governance and strategic planning. Members, thank you all very much, and I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. All the best.
Thank you, Chair.